The Caribbean Sea, once a tourist paradise, has just become the stage for an unprecedented geopolitical provocation. China, with calculated audacity, has sent its powerful war fleet to Venezuelan waters not for a diplomatic visit, but to openly challenge the United States. This is Beijing's boldest maneuver in decades, a direct affront to Washington's hegemony in its own backyard, and an unequivocal sign that a naval confrontation is imminent. The entire world watches with apprehension. Are we on the verge of a war between superpowers in the Caribbean? What was once a veiled tension now materializes in steel and fire. Pentagon intelligence reports, corroborated by high-resolution satellite imagery, confirm the presence of a Chinese naval task force that includes the formidable Type 055 guided missile destroyers, Type 054A frigates, and a Type 075 amphibious assault ship. This is not merely a show of force. It is an unequivocal declaration that China is willing to protect its strategic interests in Venezuela, whatever the cost, even if it means a direct clash with the U.S. Navy. In response, the U.S. Southern Command, SOUTHCOM, has raised its alert level to DEFCON 3, mobilizing naval and aerial assets from its strategic bases in Florida, Puerto Rico, and Guantanamo. Beijing, with cold and calculated determination, is testing the limits of Washington's patience and the relevance of the Monroe Doctrine, a pillar of American foreign policy for over 2 centuries, which now faces its most severe test. This detailed script will not only narrate events in real time, but will also unravel the complex layers underpinning this crisis. We will analyze how this audacious Chinese provocation was meticulously orchestrated over 2 decades of infrastructure investments and influence in Latin America, transforming the region from a mere commodity supplier into a geopolitical chessboard. We will investigate the economic, ideological, and strategic motivations driving Xi Jinping's boldness, who sees in Venezuela a golden opportunity to redefine the world order. And crucially, we will evaluate the potentially catastrophic consequences that a single miscalculation, a misinterpreted warning shot, an accidental collision between vessels, or an uncontrolled rhetorical escalation could have for global stability, with the real risk of an armed conflict between nuclear powers. Prepare to understand the true reason why China is provoking the U.S. in Venezuela. It is, in essence, the boldest maneuver on the vast geopolitical chessboard of the 21st century. It is a move that forces Washington to make an existential decision, placing it before an unbearable dilemma: retreat and accept the end of its undisputed primacy in the Western Hemisphere, setting a dangerous precedent for other powers, or advance and risk a direct confrontation with a rival nuclear power. With incalculable human and economic costs, join us in this in-depth analysis to unravel the complexities of this critical moment, where rhetoric has materialized into warships, and the drums of a new Cold War resonate louder than ever. The arrival of the Chinese fleet in Venezuelan waters is not an isolated incident, but the culmination of a carefully planned power projection strategy by Beijing. This move represents a direct provocation to the Monroe Doctrine and Washington's traditional sphere of influence. The presence of state-of-the-art planned naval assets so close to American shores is a declaration of intent that echoes in the corridors of global power, forcing the U.S. into a response. According to naval intelligence analyses and reports from specialized media such as Naval News and the War Zone, the Chinese task force includes key elements of its blue water fleet. The presence of at least 2 Type 055 Renhai-class guided missile destroyers, such as the Nanchang and the Lhasa, has been confirmed. These ships, considered among the most powerful in the world, are equipped with a 112 vertical launching system, VLS cells capable of firing anti-aircraft, anti-ship and land attack missiles, representing a significant threat to any aircraft carrier strike group. Complementing the Type 055s, Type 054A, Zhangkai II-class frigates, such as the Zhuchang and the Wuhu, known for their anti-submarine and anti-surface capabilities, were sighted. Furthermore, the inclusion of a Type 075 Hainan-class amphibious assault ship, such as the Hainan, suggests the capability to project ground forces or conduct large-scale logistical support operations, raising the level of threat and the complexity of the response required by the U.S. The United States response was immediate and decisive. The U.S. Southern Command, SOUTHCOM, headquartered in Doral, Florida, raised its alert level to DEFCON 3, a measure indicating a significant increase in military readiness. Pentagon sources cited by CNN confirmed the mobilization of Carrier Strike Group 12, led by the USS Gerald R. Ford, the world's most advanced aircraft carrier. This group includes at least one Ticonderoga-class cruiser, the USS Normandy, and a squadron of Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, such as the USS Thomas Hudner and the USS Paul Ignatius. Additionally, the presence of Virginia-class fast-attack submarines, such as the USS Montana, operating stealthily in the region to monitor and, if necessary, neutralize any Chinese submarine threat, was confirmed. Southcom's official statement, while maintaining a tone of ensuring security and freedom of navigation, contained an unequivocal warning. Any foreign state actor intending to destabilize the region and support illicit regimes will face a firm and forceful response. This declaration, reported by Agencia EFE, made it clear that Washington would not tolerate the Chinese military presence as a fait accompli. The tension in the Caribbean was not just a matter of geopolitics, it was a demonstration of raw power, with two of the world's most powerful navies on a potential collision course, raising the stakes for an imminent naval confrontation. For the Venezuelan government, the arrival of the Chinese fleet was a political lifeline and a reaffirmation of its defiant stance. Nicolás Maduro, in a speech broadcast by Venezolana de Televisión BTV, described the Chinese naval presence as an act of sovereignty and cooperation between sister nations and a forceful response to Washington's imperialist threats. The official Venezuelan rhetoric, amplified by state media, emphasized national sovereignty and the right to self-defense against what they considered aggression. Tens of thousands of Venezuelans mobilized by the government flooded the streets of Caracas, waving Venezuelan and Chinese flags in a show of support for the regime and its new ally. This mobilization, though orchestrated, reflected a sentiment of resistance against external pressure and an endorsement of the Chinese provocation. In direct response to the growing American military presence, Venezuela announced large-scale military exercises, dubbed Bolivarian Shield 2025, on La Orchila Island and along the eastern coast. These maneuvers, which included the participation of units from the Bolivarian National Armed Forces, FANB, and the integration of Russian and Chinese-made air defense systems, were presented as a demonstration of defensive capability and a warning that the country would not be an easy target. The tension in the atmosphere was almost palpable, and the world watched with apprehension, aware that any miscalculation could transform this rhetorical and military escalation into a conflict of unpredictable proportions. With each approaching ship, with each more incisive declaration, the Caribbean transformed into a chessboard where moves were calculated, but the consequences uncertain. And in this scenario of uncertainty, the Chinese presence completely altered the game's dynamic, forcing the U.S. to reevaluate every step in the face of an imminent naval confrontation. China's decision to send its war fleet to Venezuela is not an impulsive act, but a manifestation of its ambition to provoke the U.S. and redefine the world order. This strategic move, which openly challenges the Monroe Doctrine, reveals a new phase in Beijing's foreign policy, where non-intervention gives way to an active military presence in regions considered vital for its interests and to test the limits of American hegemony. The Chinese provocation in Venezuela is multifaceted and deeply rooted in its long-term interests. A senior official from China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in a statement to Xinhua news agency, affirmed that the naval presence seeks to protect China's legitimate interests in the region and safeguard global stability. However, analysts such as Dr. Evan Ellis of the U.S. Army War College argue that the primary motivation is the protection of massive investments and access to strategic resources. Over the past 2 decades, China has invested more than $60 billion in Venezuela, mainly in oil and gas projects, in addition to financing critical infrastructure and telecommunication systems. These investments are not just financial. They represent a fundamental pillar for China's energy security and the expansion of its global influence. Venezuela, with the world's largest proven oil reserves, is an invaluable strategic partner for Beijing, guaranteeing the supply of vital resources for its booming economy and consolidating its presence in a region traditionally dominated by the United States. Chinese military presence also serves as a clear message to Washington. The era of undisputed American primacy in the Western Hemisphere is in jeopardy. Beijing seeks to establish its own Monroe Doctrine, where its economic and military influence extends globally, challenging the unipolar order. This paradigm shift, according to experts from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, indicates that China is transitioning from a regional defense policy to one of global expansion. Venezuela, with its vast oil reserves and strategic location, becomes an epicenter of this new strategy, a springboard for the projection of Chinese power in the backyard of the United States. This Chinese audacity not only reconfigures the balance of power in the region, but also raises profound questions about the future of global geopolitics and the possibility of a new Cold War, with flashpoints in unexpected places, and with an imminent naval confrontation. In Caracas, Chinese support was met with jubilation and relief. Nicolas Maduro, in a televised address by Telesur, publicly thanked the Chinese government, declaring, "China is our elder brother, our strategic ally with whom we will build the multipolar future and justice for the peoples of the world." This meticulously orchestrated moment was immediately broadcast during prime time by Chinese state television CCTV, presented as a symbol of the unbreakable alliance between both countries against U.S. imperialist and hegemonic aggression. This narrative not only reinforces the legitimacy of the Maduro regime internally but also projects China's image as a responsible global superpower, willing to directly confront Western power to defend its allies and a new model of global governance. Analysts from the Washington Post observe that, although Maduro's gestures may seem largely symbolic, they conceal a serious military-political strategy. China, by openly positioning itself in defense of Venezuela, is sending a clear message to the world. Its sphere of influence is no longer limited to Asia, and it is willing to provoke the U.S. in its own territory. In Washington, the incursion of the Chinese fleet into the Caribbean was not met with indifference, but with growing alarm that resonated through the halls of power. The Pentagon, in particular, observed with great concern this deployment, which represents a tacit violation of the Monroe Doctrine and a direct challenge to American national security. The question looming over the Capitol was clear: how to respond to this provocation without triggering a conflict of catastrophic proportions. Sources from the National Security Council, cited by the Wall Street Journal, revealed that privately, the American administration weighed a scenario of a limited naval blockade or a more aggressive interception. However, national security advisors reportedly warned of the catastrophic consequences if even a single Chinese warship were damaged. The memory of the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis loomed like a specter, reminding everyone of the swiftness with which a regional crisis can escalate into a global confrontation with nuclear potential. Beijing's audacity, willing for the first time in its history to challenge Washington not only for its own interests, but in defense of a country in another hemisphere, was something previously considered unthinkable. This paradigm shift, according to experts from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, indicates that China is transitioning from a regional defense policy to one of global expansion. Venezuela, with its vast oil reserves and strategic location in the backyard of the U.S., has become the epicenter of this new strategy, with an imminent naval confrontation. Meanwhile, the crisis reverberated in other global capitals, revealing deep divisions. In NATO, the debate was intense. According to Politico, in the corridors of Brussels, allies failed to reach a consensus on a unified response. The United Kingdom and Poland, aligned with a firmer U.S. stance, insisted on the need for a collective response in case of confrontation with China. On the other hand, Germany and France adopted a more cautious approach. A source from the German Ministry of Foreign Affairs stated that Berlin considered it madness to fight China over Venezuela. Paris, in turn, proposed a diplomatic mission to mediate between Washington and Beijing, seeking a solution that would avoid military escalation. This division within NATO underscored the complexity of the situation and the reluctance of some European powers to engage in a direct confrontation with China over an issue they considered distant from their immediate interests. In Latin America, opinions were equally polarized. According to El País, Cuba and Nicaragua officially expressed their willingness to provide Venezuela with infrastructure for joint defensive actions, strengthening ties with Caracas and Beijing. Countries like Brazil and Argentina, on the other hand, issued cautious statements, urging de-escalation and dialogue, avoiding explicit partisanship. The Organization of American States, OASN, for its part, condemned external interference in the region, a clear allusion to China, but without directly mentioning the U.S., highlighting the difficulty of regional consensus. This international fragmentation demonstrates the complexity of the new multipolar order, where loyalty and interest intersect in unpredictable ways, especially in the face of such a direct Chinese provocation. At the heart of this intricate web of geopolitical and military interests, Venezuela finds itself in a position of extreme vulnerability, but also of unexpected centrality. The nation, struggling with a deep internal crisis, has become the epicenter of a dispute that redefines sovereignty and the global balance of power. The presence of the Chinese fleet in its waters is not only an act of support, but a catalyst for a new world order, where the Caribbean ceases to be an American lake to become a disputed sea, under Chinese provocation. For the government of Nicolás Maduro, the Chinese naval deployment is a reaffirmation of Venezuelan sovereignty against U.S. pressure. However, this help comes at a price. Analysts from the Atlantic Council warn that Venezuela runs the risk of being instrumentalized by China, becoming a pawn in the global power chess game. Economic dependence on Beijing, now coupled with military dependence, could further erode Caracas's autonomy, transforming it into a de facto client state. The Chinese presence also raises questions about the future of regional security. What are the implications for neighboring countries such as Colombia, Brazil, or the Caribbean nations? The militarization of the Caribbean by external powers could destabilize an already fragile region, increasing the risk of incidents and the proliferation of weaponry. The Monroe Doctrine, although criticized, provided a certain predictability. Its open challenge by China introduces an era of uncertainty and potential conflict, with an imminent naval confrontation. The future of the Caribbean and global hegemony is uncertain. If China manages to establish a permanent military presence in Venezuela, this would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the Western Hemisphere. It would be a monumental strategic victory for Beijing, consolidating its status as a global superpower, capable of projecting power in any corner of the planet. For the United States, it would represent a historic setback, forcing it to reevaluate its defense strategy and its role as guarantor of regional security. In the face of Chinese provocation, the dilemma of Venezuela is a microcosm of the global dilemma: how smaller nations can navigate a world dominated by superpowers, especially when their strategic location and natural resources become the center of a geopolitical dispute. The arrival of the Chinese fleet is not just about Venezuela. It is about sovereignty, self-determination, and the right of a country to control its own destiny in an increasingly polarized global scenario. It is the sound of the drums of a new Cold War, resonating in the warm waters of the Caribbean, with consequences that we cannot yet foresee, and with an imminent naval confrontation. China's provocation with the deployment of its war fleet in Venezuela to challenge the U.S. marks an undeniable turning point in contemporary history. What was once a competition for influence is now a direct confrontation of wills and military capabilities. The Caribbean, traditionally a scenario for American maneuvers, has become the new epicenter of a struggle for global hegemony, where two superpowers face each other, with the world holding its breath before an imminent naval confrontation. This escalation is not an isolated incident. It is a symptom of a tectonic shift in the world order. China, with its growing economic and military might, is no longer content with a regional role. It actively seeks to challenge American primacy on all fronts, including its own backyard. Beijing's audacity in Venezuela is a declaration that no region is beyond its reach, and that it is willing to take calculated risks to redefine the balance of power. The implications of this confrontation are vast and far-reaching. For Venezuela, it means greater instrumentalization and increasingly compromised sovereignty. For Latin America, it represents the militarization of its region and the pressure to choose sides in a new Cold War. For the world, it is the confirmation that the era of unipolarity has ended. And that confrontation between great powers is now a palpable reality, with ignition points in unexpected places. The future is uncertain, but one thing is clear: the geopolitical chessboard has changed forever. The presence of Chinese warships in the Caribbean is a somber reminder that global peace hangs by a thread, and that every move, every decision, can have catastrophic repercussions. Humanity has entered a new and dangerous phase, where a misstep in the Caribbean can lead to an unimaginable catastrophe. To understand the next moves in this deadly chess game and how they may affect the future of the global economy and peace, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications.